Gas fitter exam cram session, video 8. Okay, standard weight is schedule 40, but the test will not ask it as schedule 40. It's got to be standard weight. Since we're on the topic, these are not going to be questions on the exam, but just to get a better feel for steel piping, something you should know. The more comfortable you are with the general field here, the better you'll be able to handle questions. So we talk about 3.5 inch as a commercially available size. It is the largest half size commercially available, 4.5 inch piping. Now 3.5 inch, 4.5 inch, you don't see it a lot. It's rare, but they do exist. So it's good if you know they do exist. We can prove that they exist and that they're still usable, and that if we look at the rigid geared threaders, the number 141, the number 161, the number 141 is going to handle from 2.5 to 4 inch pipe. Okay, these are the geared threaders, extremely large. You have to change the dies themselves depending on the size of pipe. So if you got 2.5 inch up to 4, you're going to have 4 sets of dies that come with the 141. It's going to be 2.5, 3, 3.5, 4. 4 sets of dies for the 141. The 161 goes even larger. You're going to also have 4 sets of dies. The 161 cuts dies from 4 inch pipe to 6 inch pipe. 4 sets of dies. 4 inch, 4.5, 5, 6. There's no 5.5 because we just mentioned 4.5 is the largest half size commercially available. And if you noticed, we went for the 161 from 4, 4.5 to 5, and then we went to 6. So 5 inch is going to be the last odd size commercially available. After 5, it's all evens. You go to 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, etc. This brings another point. It doesn't really play much here in the gas exam, but in the civil service examinations, the number 7. And I bring it up just to show how important numerology is for these exams. The number 7 is the right answer once and only once in, say, the plumber exam. If we're talking about a vent termination on the roof is occupied, people walk on it, or it's flat and you can, maintenance men, whoever can go service mechanical systems or whatever, it's got to be 7 feet high. Okay, with vent terminations, these are off the waste system. So we got sewer gas that's being vented to the air. Anything lower than 7 feet, you take a chance. Someone walks by, gets a whiff of it, boom, unconscious, dead. So it makes total sense, 7 feet. But that's it. If you look anywhere in the codes, you'll find that the number 7, it pops up once and only once for that particular situation. Telling you that anything else code-wise, the number 7, if it's a choice in one of the questions, probably not the right answer. It's a weird little fact, but it's something that's good to know. Okay, it can help you out when the guy next to you is, they're looking at all 4 choices and you're only looking at 3 choices because 7, well, you knew that doesn't apply to anything. You can take that out of the equation. Okay, so 5 inch is the largest odd size you're going to have for steel piping. And I mentioned from 5, then we go 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. Oh, 14 is also special. 14 has this distinction that at 14 and up, the nominal size, which we say is 14, is also going to be exactly the OD, the outside diameter. For sizes below that, we know that we can call a 2-inch pipe a 2-inch pipe, but it's not exactly 2 inches on the inside. It's not exactly 2 inches on the outside. It's the nominal size. It's the size we use to refer to it, but the exact outside and inside dimensions, they differ a little bit. Okay, the outside dimension, regardless of the schedule, would have to stay the same size, or else threading pipe would be complicated. You buy a particular piece of equipment to thread piping. Regardless of the schedule, the pipe has to stay the same outside diameter, or else you're going to have several different machines just to thread one particular size. Doesn't make sense. So the OD has to stay the same, but the inside diameter is always going to change, because if the wall gets thicker, it's got to get thicker inwards. Also, how they manufacture the piping and everything, it's like a 2x4. You know, you're going to go to the lumber yard, you're going to buy a 2x4. We all know a 2x4 does not measure exactly 2 inches by 4 inches. No. Same thing with pipe in nominal diameter, except when we get to 14. At 14, the nominal diameter is also exactly the outside diameter. So 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, etc., etc. Outside diameter is exactly the same as the nominal. So when you say 14, you're saying two things. Okay, don't kill yourself committing this to heart. I just thought it was interesting information. Gives you a better idea of material you're working with, especially when, you know, if someone doesn't tell you, you might not even be aware that there is such a thing as 3.5-inch pipe, 4.5-inch pipe, because it's something that's not really, it's not common, it's rare to see it, but it does exist. All right, next question. Question 31. Gas pipe and fittings shall be thoroughly brushed and blown. Okay, we're installing new pipe. They want you, brush the threads clean, blow any debris, whatever out of the pipe. Who knows what collects in there when it's stored, during transit, etc. All right, this is a sentence in the code. This will be a question. I had this question. But this also falls under the category of those questions about stuff that we know that's what we're supposed to do, but let's face it, it just never happens, because you can put this question under, well, we're also going to ream pipe, okay? Reaming pipe. You cut pipe with a traditional pipe cutter with the little wheels, it's going to leave an inside burr, okay? You're going to have to ream that out. When do we ream it out? I don't know. You can go back to your apprenticeship or your very basic. You're going to ream it out before you thread it. You thread the pipe and then you ream it out. You have the chance that you stretch out the end of the pipe just enough that now you go to catch it, it's not going to catch. So you ream it before you thread it. These are things that we know. You're going to answer that correctly whenever you're asked on an exam. The civil service exam, the master plumber exam, I think it's the Star 5 exam for your journeyman, to be a journeyman. But admit it, when have you ever done it? When have you ever seen it done? I know I walk by every Rigid 300. The reamer is the shiniest, brand newest piece on any machine. If it's still on there, sometimes they take it right off and it's sitting there on the floor in the gang box. Sometimes you'll find mechanics or journeymen, they were not even aware that little thing in the tubing cutter that comes out and that's actually for reaming. They weren't even aware that exists. Okay, we don't ream pipe, but we're supposed to. The code says we should, and we should also brush and blow out the piping before we use it for installing gas. So, sure, we do that. Yeah. On the test, of course we do that. Question 32. Defects in gas distribution piping shall, this could be a bit of a trick question, be repaired, not be repaired, Be repaired, but only by factory-trained individuals. Be repaired within reasonable limits. I give you all 4 choices because this is not a terribly difficult question. If you read the code, you know the answer. It's easy enough for you to make a mistake if you don't prepare, but defects in gas distribution piping shall not be repaired at all. Okay, if there's something wrong with it, you throw it away. It's garbage material. It's a loss. Whoever priced out the job, they got to allow at least, 5% for defects in workmanship. They got to realize that, there's a good possibility that, up to 5% of material they receive is going to be defective. Okay, so you order the exact amount, and now you got a sand hole in a fitting, or you got a weird weld. That happens more often than you can imagine. You're looking for a leak. You're trying to find a leak. Where do you spray? Well, usually around the joints. The hardest leak to find is, you realize pipe is made from plate. The plate is curved around, turned into one long pipe, and then submerged arc welding, where they put the pipe underneath like a sandy material, and then the arc is actually buried in that sandy material and just runs along and welds the seam. Sometimes those seams get crazy, they're not complete, or the folding process, the rolling process wasn't perfect. You're going to have a leak there. You don't think to check the entire length of the pipe, but if you've been checking everywhere and you can't find a leak, it's quite possible you have a defect in the actual seam weld. That can happen. You don't go and take a welder and try and fix that. That piece of pipe's got to be thrown away. That fitting with the sand hole, we're not going to try to weld that. We're not going to try to do any kind of repair on that. It's got to be thrown away. Okay, so defects in gas distribution piping shall not be repaired whatsoever. The shutoff valve shall be in the same room as the appliance. Okay, so not only, because we already went over this, that the shutoff valve and the union have to be within 6 feet of the appliance. That shutoff valve itself is also got to be in the same room. Maybe we got 6 feet because we went 6 feet and we went 3 feet, hit a wall, went through the wall, into the other room, another 3 feet, put the valve. Not good. The valve's got to be in the same room as the appliance. Once again, it's a safety issue. There's something wrong with the appliance. How do we shut it off? Where do we shut it off? Well, if it's in the same room as the appliance, you have a better chance of figuring that out. It's going to be visible. It's got to be accessible in the same room within 6 feet. It kind of limits where the valve's going to be, and hopefully it's going to be as close as possible to rectify the situation. Okay. Number 14. Here is where we enter another area that for those just studying for this exam and encountering this for the first time in the New York City Fuel Gas Code, it causes a lot of confusion. Once again, it's a situation where 2 different sets of material in the code seem to contradict each other, but they don't. And add to that we again hit the what I mentioned, that the tables, some tables have mistakes that have not been fixed. For this particular set of information, yes, there's going to be another table with a glaring mistake that has not yet been fixed. Can be confusing, but we're going to go over it right now so that we learn it right from the start and we know exactly what we're dealing with. Okay. The number of threads to be cut on a 1-inch gas pipe is 10. Okay? This is a good starting point. Remember, because this is going to involve tables. Tables that we have to memorize. All of them. All the little entries by heart. Because you can be asked any single entry on the table. You can ask 1-inch pipe, 3/4 pipe, 1/2-inch pipe, this and that. And You can be asked the number of threads that are going to be cut or the length of threads that will be cut. It's two different things. It feels like the same thing. It feels like the information is contradicting, but it's not. So, and just to make life easier, once again, if you go to the back cover, you'll see that, you'll see a table where we have the iron pipe size and both pieces of information next to each other, the length of the threaded portion and the number of threads to be cut. Okay? So, let's first deal with the number of threads to be cut on a 1-inch gas pipe is 10. So 1 inch will have 10 threads on it. Okay. This is not the same thing as threads per inch. Okay. Because we know that when we're dealing with 1 inch through 2-inch pipe, that we're going to have, as far as the threads per inch, the TPI, the threads per inch, and that's already established. That's a standard. You buy a rigid cutter. You can buy a drop head, and it'll just cut the 1 inch. You can buy a 300 and have it equipped with a speed chuck, where you can quickly change from, let's say, 1 inch to 2 inch, just with the lever and moving it around. Or you can buy the universal threader, which for hand threading, which you can also change from 1 to 2 inch, and the piping in between. All of that is going to cut your threads at a standard threads per inch, meaning for every inch of pipe you are threading, you will have a set number of threads on there all the time. So it stays uniform. It stays uniform with fittings, so you can work. You can count on this fitting that. So for 1 inch through to 2 inch, the threads per inch are going to be 11.5. 11.5 threads per inch. Okay. Well, something doesn't seem right. The first thing I get a lot is, well, wait a minute. 1 inch pipe is supposed to have 11.5 threads per inch. That individual is absolutely correct. So is the code wrong? No, the code says that for a piece of 1 inch pipe that's properly threaded, and you're going to thread a piece of pipe pretty much the same way you're going to thread any piece of steel pipe for any application. You're generally going to thread it the same way. Gas is no different. You're pretty much threading it the same way. You're going to get the same amount of threads that you would, thread another piece of steel pipe using the drop head. You thread it just to where the end of the pipe finishes is flush with the dies. You're going to get the same threads. You're not doing anything different, but for some reason it says 10 threads on a piece of 1 inch, but we know we get 11.5 threads per inch. Both are right. So it takes a second to realize, so is it possible that we're not putting a full 1 inch of threads on the end of a piece of 1 inch? That's exactly what's going on. Yes, the threads on a piece of 1 inch will be 11.5 per inch because that's the industry standard. That's how we do it. But we're not putting a full inch of threads on the end of a 1 inch pipe. We don't need a full inch of threads. If we had a full inch of threads on the end of a piece of 1 inch pipe, it would make up too far into the fitting. So we have about 10 threads, because you can ask the next logical question, well, if we're not threading a full inch on the end of a piece of 1 inch pipe, well, then how much, how long? What's the length of the threads we are going to get? On average, putting a proper thread on, well, it's going to be 7/8 of an inch long. 7/8 of an inch long of threads comes out to approximately 10 threads, and that's it, just 10 threads on the end of a piece of 1 inch. And by the industry standard, the pitch or the number of threads that we should expect to get per inch, because the die is the die, it's always going to produce that number of threads for every inch of threading we do, is 11.5. It all works. It does not contradict each other. This is exactly what is happening. Okay, I'll draw a little picture. Okay, and we got our threads. Okay, for 1 inch length of threading, we could expect 11.5 threads per inch, but we didn't thread that much on a piece of 1 inch. We only went 7/8 of the way. And because we only went 7/8 of the way, we only have 10 threads on the pipe, approximately, okay? Even the code itself says, it's not exactly 10, okay? It's around 10. If you look at the table, I didn't put the word approximate in the table. The code puts the word approximate in their table, and I do want you to look at the table, because this is where you're going to see, yes, okay. Page 115. Page 115 is going to be a page from the actual code. This is the publication from the Department of Buildings. I haven't touched it. I reproduce it exactly. So, on page 115, the upper left, it's the only table there, specifications for threading metallic pipe. We're not going to concern ourselves with the whole table yet, but let's look at the 1 inch. 1 inch is 3 entries down from the top. If we look to the far right, approximate number of threads to be cut, it says 10. We've already established that that is correct. Okay, and here's where you see the word approximate. On my tables and stuff, I try to eliminate as many words as possible. I really want, more than anything, the numbers themselves to be the things you see in your mind's eye when you're trying to remember this. The numbers hit you. The numbers hit you, because that's the bulk of the questions. It's like, how much this, how much that, what, which of the following. It's usually a number. So the numbers are important. The words, not as much. Okay, but now if we see on the 1 inch line, we see approximate length of threaded portion. If you look real close, because the writing is small, it says 1/8. Okay, let's say we didn't give that too much thought, 1/8. Even if we hadn't established already, it's got to be 7/8 of an inch, and that, it's 11.5 threads per inch. And we got 10 threads. I mean, all this already is telling us 1/8 doesn't seem right. Let's look at the table. 1/2 inch is going to have approximately 3/4 length of threads. 3/4 also. About 3/4 of an inch worth of threads. And then if we jump to 1.25 inches, it's going to have 1 inch worth length of threads. Okay? So, it's just logically impossible that 1 inch would have only 1/8 worth of threads. So, where could the mistake possibly have happened? Well, if you're not paying attention, I guess a 7 can look like a 1 a little bit. So 1/8 when they actually meant 7/8. In the table I give you, it says 7/8. Okay? And I leave it big enough so that you know, it's like, because 1/8 is impossible. This mistake was in the 2008 version of the fuel gas code. In the 2014 version, as far as the writing was concerned, the text was concerned, changes were made. Okay? Where they said they made changes, they made them. It was clear exactly what they wanted changed, but the tables remained the same. So, you know, I mean, I'm not invited to these things. I guess a little background information for exactly how the code, how to get around to figuring out what the code's going to look like. They do get a lot of inputs, so it's possible, you know, for you guys who have been working on the outside, if you read the full code, you know, the acknowledgement pages, the dedication pages, etc., you know, the pages that give you more background as to exactly what's going on down there at the municipal building and City Hall, they actually do invite many individuals, both from industry, manufacturing, the city, engineering firms, and possibly even the owner of your shop. There are some major shops. They do I guess they determine it upon the amount of business they do, the gross amount of business they get done in a year. I guess if you hit a certain number, they'll invite you and you can also chime in. So for you guys who work for the bigger major shops, you may also see your boss's name there too. So, but I'm not exactly sure what they do, and I have a feeling when it comes down to finally getting this all together and getting it ready for the printer, you know, whatever the final draft, once again, it must be bring your kid to work day, and I guess they give them the tables to keep them busy, you know, fix that, and they don't get fixed. What a surprise. Okay, so that was a lot, but it's important because if you are not aware of this, it is confusing. It will throw you off, and you will get the right answer because you're not comfortable with understanding exactly what is being asked and why so many different numbers for the exact same thing. If you throw threads on a piece of 1 inch, that's it. That's the thread on the 1 inch. It's going to screw in 2 or 3 times before you got to go get a wrench. And it should be very difficult to screw it entirely where all the threads disappear. There should be a few little threads left over, you know? You know what a good joint feels like. You know what it should feel like when you're getting it all set up. And then when you're putting your wrenches on it and when you feel like this is your last turn and what it should look like when you're all done. You know what that looks like. And it should be the same pretty much every single time. If it isn't, you know, whoever's fucking cutting the threads, you know, they're cutting them too long or too short. You know, they're cutting them too deep or too shallow. Or, you know, the threads got crossed. Or something's up with the fitting. You know, there's a standard. It's not going to change. You know, we live in a physical world with physical laws. So, these numbers are changing simply because of how we're looking at it. Are we looking at the pitch of the die itself, which is never changing? Well, the pitch of the die says from 1 to 2 inch, 11.5 threads per inch. Are we looking at exactly how much thread we put on? Well, we don't put 1 inch worth of thread onto a 1 inch pipe. And we just saw on the table, we will put 1 inch worth of threading on a piece 1.25 inches. And we saw on the table, and they said the word approximate, it does come out to 11 threads per inch. Here, 11.5 to be exact, but comes out to 11. Makes total sense. Also helps us now remember this, because we know 1 inch is where Victor started this incredibly long fucking diatribe on how threads can be even way more complicated than we thought they needed to be for this test. But they are. He started at 1 inch, and we saw how different everything is. But then so now we know, well, at least when we go to 1.25 inches, it's easier because at 1.25 inches, we actually work with a full 1 inch length of threading, which means that this number we love so much, this number which, you know, we definitely have seen from the beginning of our plumbing careers, holds true.